タリク・カリム大使にまずご講演をいただきます。大使よろしくお願いいたします。Ambassador, please.
Good afternoon. Konnichiwa. I thank the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, its president, and the senior members, particularly Mr. Itsu Adachi, his colleague Maho Nakayama, and all the members of SPF to inviting me here to share my thoughts and my vision for our future in the Bay of Bengal. Let me preface my remarks with a few slides, because I believe that we are all shaped by our environment and where we live and by our neighborhood. So it is important for you to understand where my ideas are coming from. If you look at this, this is a map of Bangladesh in Asia. It shows the relative size of Bangladesh with the countries in Asia and the neighboring countries that are around us. The next slide shows how, as we zoom out, Bangladesh becomes a smaller country in the larger Eurasian context. And then, if we look at South and Southeast Asia in the Indian Ocean, you see it is somewhere at the apex of the Bay of Bengal. That is how a space traveler coming from another galaxy looking at this planet would look at us. And then you look, that space traveler will see a world which is a blue world, a world of oceans. And in that ocean, if he's looking, that tiny spot there is Bangladesh. In a sense, where we are located is right at the epicenter of the oceanic world. And the Bay of Bengal, if we are talking of an Indo-Pacific, we are talking of two oceans connecting with each other, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. They cannot connect unless there is a Bay of Bengal with the Strait of Malacca connecting it. That is the importance of the Bay of Bengal in the context of whether we are talking of Indo-Pacific or we are talking of BRI, whichever side we approach it. And we, in the Bay of Bengal, are right in the epicenter of that, and Bangladesh is right at the apex of this epicenter. That is what shapes largely our thinking. That is what drives my mission. Historically, the Bay of Bengal has been a regional entity, one of the most important economic centers of activity before World War II ended it. It was one of the largest trading conglomerates stretching from South to Southeast Asia. It connected the Eastern civilizations with the Western civilizations, and they all crossed through the Bay of Bengal. I would like to recall here something that an American strategist thinker posited a long time ago. His number one was, and I refer to Admiral Thayer Mahan, that it is naval sea power, control of the sea lanes, which makes nations great, the ability to keep the trading routes open. That is what made Britain the ruler of the world and the oceans until capitalism and their own power declined in World War II. And from that, he posited his own theories of why America should be a great naval power and be in control of all the sea lanes everywhere. I am deviating a little from the written text, and because it's a long written text, but the written text that has been circulated will give you a deeper context of what I'm talking about. He also posited that in future times, not in his times, in future times, whoever controlled the Indian Ocean will control Asia. So in a sense, he was prophetic. He foresaw the importance of the Indian Ocean rising to move away the importance that had previously existed with the center in the Atlantic and the Pacific. Now, the Indian Ocean region holds more than 58% of the world's proven oil and over 46% of the world's gas reserves. That is what makes the Indian Ocean so very important. The competition between India and China over access to Myanmar's offshore gas fields is partly attributable to the same competition. The northern Indian Ocean constitutes a key passageway in global east-west trade, east-west-east trade, both ways, maintaining an unimpeded flow of crude oil from producing to consuming countries in the Indian Ocean region and across to other oceanic regions through gateways or choke points is a sine qua non for all major, middle, or even lesser powers, particularly in today's world. The Indian Ocean also contains non-energy renewable and non-renewable resources. Fisheries and minerals are the most commercially viable resources. More than 1 billion people globally rely on marine fishery for their protein intake, which adds strategic value to the oceans. Now, the strategic importance of the Bay of Bengal in our oceanic planet derives from the fact that it is an integral component of the Indian Ocean. And Indian Ocean is referred by many geographers as the Great Middle Bay because it is the smallest ocean between the two large oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic. In that sense, the Bay of Bengal is the lesser central bay within the Indian Ocean. And that's what gives it the strategic importance. I mentioned the figures of trade going through the Indian Ocean and through the Bay of Bengal. 90%, if 90% of container trade is going through the Indian Ocean, 45 to 50% is going through the Bay of Bengal. And it's the same strategic trade that I referred to. It is for this reason that many of the countries in the Bay of Bengal are striving very hard to develop deep-sea ports. And I will display a table here which will give you the idea of the ports being developed. From Singapore to Matarbari, but there is also a port coming up in the Bay of Bengal, Chiokpho, in Myanmar, being developed by the Chinese, which will have a draft of between 20 feet at the high tide and 20 meters and 10 meters at low. It is under construction, I believe. It will happen. It was the British who first attributed to the Indian Ocean, and particularly the Bay of Bengal, the importance it has today by setting up the chain of pearls, of ports from Karachi along the western part of the Indian Ocean, through Mumbai, Chennai, and then up through Visakhapatnam, Calcutta, and then going south from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, into Singapore. That was the network they set up as a colonial power for extraction of resources and selling back finished products to these colonies. I have been endeavoring to say that we should use the same network for our own self-development now. Because without connectivity, without people and traders meeting, you cannot trade. You cannot trade if you have very strict visa regimes dividing the countries. And that is what happened when what I describe as the post-colonial New Westphalian disorder emerged after 1945. The earlier preeminence of the Bay was because even before the British came, long before the British came, Bengal was one of the richest parts of South Asia. And during Mughal times, at the height of Mughal rules, it contributed quite a sizable GDP to the global GDP. When British came, the British president, they ruled India through 3 presidencies, and Bengal presidency was the largest of the 3 presidencies. It stretched from Arakan through Bengal, Assam, UP, right into the limits of the frontier. Later on, it whittled down, and it was basically Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, and Assam. Just as the Bay constituted an economy that fueled world trade before World War II, it is my belief, not just hope, my belief, that the Bay will rise again. Just as discovery of rich hydrocarbon deposits in the 20th century had spurred shift of colonial powers competing and jostling with each other for access and control over these strategic resources, the more recent discovery of large hydrocarbon deposits in the Bay of Bengal region has served to shift the gaze of competing 21st century powers to this region. Now, I come to the point I would like to really emphasize here. Why am I talking about the Bay of Bengal, and then why am I talking about Bangladesh and the Bay of Bengal, and why it relates to the larger Indo-Pacific narrative that we are? The Bay of Bengal today has regained its historically critical importance as an economic highway for commercial shipping between Eastern and Western hemispheres. About half the world's container traffic passes through this region, while its ports handle approximately 33% of world trade. This is just in the Bay of Bengal. This may be expected to increase exponentially after the new projects of ports are being pulled in. And I should have mentioned earlier, when you look at Matarbari there, that is a major Japanese development project within Bangladesh. It's a major connectivity project which Japan invested in and has helped Bangladesh to develop. And with it will come development of an economic zone, and basically it is geared to link up the landlocked Northeast and other landlocked countries in the South Asian subcontinent and channel trade. Because at the heart of everything, remember what Admiral Mehan had said, without trade, a nation cannot prosper. Without control of shipping lanes and free trade routes across the seas, nations will not be able to prosper. That is the importance of connectivity in the modern world, and that is the importance of the Bay of Bengal in the Indo-Pacific or BRI narrative. Look at the GDP of the states in South and Southeast Asia. And it is quite an impressive figure. India, of course, looms very large, but there are Thailand and Malaysia and Indonesia also, which are very large. Just keep that in mind as I go into the next part of my talk. I look at these countries as constituting what in my vision, is a possible Bay of Bengal economic community emerging. Economic cooperation being first, and then whether they want to take cooperation further along will depend on goodwill and the success of the ventures. The Bay of Bengal countries today account for a population of well over 1.7 billion, a little over 20% of the global population. It is projected, and you will see this in the next slide, who could comprise the Bay of Bengal economic community. It is projected to exceed 2.5 billion, over 25% of the projected global population by 2030, which is just 6 years away. It has an aggregated GDP of nearly $7,000 billion, aggregated. By 2028, its aggregated GDP will be close to $11 trillion. With some of the fastest growing economies, and Bangladesh was one of them, it still has that potential, I believe, after the present teething pains that we are, as a young state, going through. And given the comparative advantage of population, particularly in Bangladesh, we have what is the youth dividend, 50% of the population, nearly, of the age of 18 to 45. These are vibrant economies. These are emerging powers in their own standing. And if they so choose, they could all cooperate for economic cooperation and development, which would make them a fraternity, a fourth fraternity standing up to the world, free from pressure from anybody. When we talk of Indo-Pacific as a hyphenated region, we have to concede that these two oceans only meet because of the Bay of Bengal. And I am sorry if I'm repeating this point, but it is worth repeating, because people normally tend to look at it as in a hypothetical way and forget the realities, that nothing is hypothetical. Countries and peoples and regions are comprised of citizens, and citizens have to buy in to a project for any project to succeed. Thank you. I would reasonably assume that most, if not all, the Bay region countries are fast developing into emerging middle powers with gravitas of their own. The Bay is notably dispute-free. None of the Bay countries have maritime disputes with each other. If we have a problem today, it is the problem of domestic problems, political problems within Myanmar, and today also somewhat within Bangladesh. These are the two countries I look upon as bridge countries between South Asia and Southeast and East Asia. They have been historically bridge countries. They are even more today, in today's context, bridge countries. Myanmar is the eastern span of the bridge and Bangladesh the western span. And I see the bridge burning in the middle. Myanmar is much larger in size than Bangladesh, but has a population less than 1/3 of Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a long history of political and social activism, a long struggle for democracy in which we are still struggling to find our version and shape of democracy which will lead us to greater prosperity. And let me recapitulate that when Bangladesh was born, most people wrote it off as a state which has emerged unnaturally and not likely to survive. Mr. U. Alexis Johnson, the Deputy Secretary of State of US, in a cabinet meeting with President Nixon and Mr. Kissinger on the 17th of December, 71, said, well, Bangladesh has emerged and it's going to be a basket case. And of course, the retort was not our basket case. That is a remark which rankles with me even today as a Bangladeshi. But we turned out not to be a basket case. We not only survived as a state, we actually became an emerging tiger. We have political problems today. Those are problems of governance. But I would argue that despite consistency in good governance throughout from our independence, there have been ups and downs, we still managed to grow. We still managed to defeat the naysayers who said Bangladesh cannot develop or grow or prosper. And I think we will come through this crisis also. We will make our own solutions and come out of it. Once the people come in, you have seen people's revolutions happening in Korea, and the result of what it made Korea today. You have seen the revolution still going on in Thailand, which despite these political disturbances continue to grow and prosper. I predict that the same will happen for Bangladesh. And that is the reason why, if we can, there are implications for what happens or does not happen in this part of the bridge nations that I have described. If Bangladesh can calm down and start once again to keep going up, there will be hope for the region. If Bangladesh implodes, like Myanmar is, or explodes, then there will be grave problems, not just for the region, but for the world. Because, as I said, it is right at the epicenter of two oceans coming and meeting, where so much of trade and economic activities take place. So I have deviated a lot from my original text, because if I were to read it out, it would take a long time. But I have done it deliberately so to give you the capsule form, the idea that I have. And I shall be happy to continue the conversation with Dr. Imadul Islam. I think he's going to grill me there on the podium, and also take questions from the audience. But my larger idea is there in the paper. I told you can circulate it, and I'm available for questions. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。それでは引き続き笹ヶ平和財団エマドゥルイスラム上席研究員との対話に移らせていただきます。カリム大使もお席の方に。Ambassador Karim, please take a seat. でここでエマドゥルさんの方に、カリム大使にいろいろとご質問をいただきたいと思うんですが、この後の会場の皆様との質疑応答のセッションもエマドゥル上席研究員に、司会をお願いしたいと思います。エマドゥルさん、よろしくお願いします。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are very fortunate today to have you in this discussions, interview with very veteran diplomat in South Asia. In his presentation, we already found very gravity of the importance of the Bay of Bengal in the parameter of like that Indian Oceans and as well as in the Indo-Pacific in border regions. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very fortunate today having this very veteran diplomat, Ambassador Karim sir, who has continuously enlightened us through his wisdom and knowledge in regional connectivity, peace and prosperity. On behalf of Peace Building Department, the Sasakawa Peace Foundations, I must thank you and welcome to Japan and for your very thought-provoking sharing in the Bay of Bengal importance in the ground of Indo-Pacific and Southeast and South Asia.
Thank you, Dr. Islam.
So the thing is that I read your very recent article where you have mentioned that the similar thing, the importance of Indian Oceans, because it is the third largest ocean, is sometimes that you called in your article that is Great Middle Bay. Due to the geographical positions, the Bay of Bengal is a significant and central component in Indian Oceans. As you also cited several scholars about their narrations, but you also mentioned that Alfred Thayer Mahan, a prominent American strategic thinker in the 19th century, accurately predicted that controlling the Indian Ocean would lead to the dominance in Asia. So you also found that in your sharing that you also mentioned the similar importance of the Bay of Bengal because you call that its epicenter in Indian Oceans. So my question is, with the Bay of Bengal gaining strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific regions, how do you see Bangladesh positioning itself in this evolving geopolitical landscape? What specific roles can Bangladesh play fostering regional cooperation between particularly South Asia and Southeast Asia?
Thank you, Dr. Islam, for the question. I have explained in my paper at greater length. Bangladesh finds itself catapulted unwittingly or unexpectedly by its own expectations to a centrally strategic position in this narrative, competing or contesting narrative of the Indo-Pacific and the BRI. Principally because, as I said, and through the maps I demonstrated, that we are right at the epicenter of an oceanic planet and at the epicenter of Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean meetings at the Bay of Bengal. We are strategically important because we are a bridge country along with Myanmar. The expectations that were there, and this expectation has been nursed from the mid-50s through the United Nations dialogues in what was then known as the UN SCAP in the mid-50s, of the Trans-Asian Highway and Railway Corridor. It has not yet come to fruition because of politics and geopolitics intervening. In a sense, I think Bangladesh had the gumption and the guts to go forward in connecting a part which would have made at least South and Southeast Asia connect. There are gaps in the railway, big gaps, but it would have happened with the road connectivity within Bangladesh, the rail connectivity within Bangladesh, the connectivity that Bangladesh and the other seaports offer for connecting South and Southeast Asia and East Asia. Therefore, and as I mentioned, the trade, 45–50% of strategic container goes through Bay of Bengal, but 90% goes through the Indian Ocean, but the Indian Ocean to go to the Pacific has to go through the Bay of Bengal. Otherwise, it has to take the longer route and go from southern part of Australia to join the Pacific Ocean. And that has great problems. I think it'll have problems for Japan, it'll have problems for Korea, for anybody else, and of course for the United States, the western coast. So, not of our choice, but that is what history has thrust us into this situation. And I think in that situation, I, as a Bangladeshi, I think it thrusts upon us not just great opportunities, but also very great responsibility. From the beginning, we have always understood our vulnerability. That's why I deliberately displayed the 3 maps in first of where we are located in Asia, within South Asia, and within the larger South and Southeast Asian. We are India-locked, virtually India-locked, with only a sliver of territory which we share with Myanmar. And we have China at one small stage of separation away from us. We cannot forget this geolocation. Geography matters. The second thing that matters is size matters. As I mentioned, that Myanmar is larger than us, but with a smaller population. India is about 10 times larger than us, with 10 times larger population, 10 times larger capacity in economic and the military. We cannot ignore that. And we have China, which is far vaster, with far greater resources. Our endeavor has been from the very beginning that we must have good relations with all countries around us. We must have strong economic interaction with everybody, and we should be a facilitator in promoting cooperation rather than take sides with anyone, because if we take sides with one, the other will come to crush her. I remember I once described ourselves as a walnut with not a very hard shell in the jaws of 2 nutcrackers. One nutcracker is the regional nutcracker, that is India and China. The other nutcracker is the global nutcracker, that is the Indo-Pacific and the BRI. Unless we are intrinsically strong and resilient and the shell of the walnut is very strong, we will be crushed, if not by both, certainly by one. So that is our compulsion.
Yes, you were rightfully described this on. So in your thought, you also mentioned that about the Myanmar. So we know that Bangladesh has been hosting near about 1.5 million Rohingya refugees. We call that forcefully displacement people, Rohingya from Myanmar. So, and we also know that Bangladesh, both of the countries, like Bangladesh and Myanmar, their political instability. So, in your eyes, what are the main challenges, the potential pathway for achieving the sustainable repatriation for the Rohingya? So, I would like to share something. For very recent researchers mentioned that the Rohingya repatriation is a myth because it will not be happen, even it's a permanent solutions, but near future, like 5 to 10 or 15 or 20 years. So I think many of distinguished participants of these discussions, in their mind also similar questions. Actually, how can this possible, the possible pathways of repatriations, Rohingya repatriations? What is your views?
Well, I have described this as a conundrum. And I wrote a chapter for a book published by the IUB on the Rohingya issues, different aspects of it. Number one, it's ethnicity and also a shared history. People may or may not remember, let me remind them, that what is the area where the Rohingyas inhabit is Arakan. And Arakan, the eastern part, Arakan is the state on the eastern side, western side, slope of the Arakan hills or mountains. That area was part of the Bengal presidency of colonial Britain. The links with Bengal are historical. It goes back to before independence of India in 47. It goes back to 300-400 years when kings from Arakan sought refuge in Bengal and came back with help of Bengal. This was also the region, not just the ports in the Bay of Bengal. Almost all the ports, but particularly the ports on the eastern side of the Bay of Bengal, littoral states, Calcutta, Chittagong, Malaya, Malaysia, etc., and in Burma, the Arakan state. Portuguese traders and sailors came, a wave of European sailors and traders came. Arabs came before the Portuguese came. When they came, they needed to establish a trading post, because in those days, ships were not like today's. They had to establish something so they could come back to the same place. They left behind people who merged with the local people. So many of what are known as the Rohingyas are descendants of those people who came and settled in the Arakan coast, intermarried, and then picked up a patois of language, which is a mixture of the local language with many words derived from Portuguese and other sources. Chittagong is also one of them. Chittagong is also in that path. Yes, the British did social engineering. They also took people from different parts of India to different parts of the world for economic activities, and they became absorbed there. So in a sense, these Rohingyas considered this part of Burma or Arakan as their own. However, Burma has problems. It is fractured into many ethnic communities along tribal or cultural lines. And although the mainstream Burmese population are the Marmar population, Buddhist, the periphery is all non-Marmar. And this has created the problem. Burma entered military regime basically initially on its perceptions of the others depriving Burmese to go forward. It was essentially first an economic issue, which became then focused on excluding certain communities. And that is why the insurgencies, the various insurgencies in Burma have also been waging under the surface. And to control the insurgency, the political government did have an agreement, did sign an agreement, but then the military took over. And once the military took over, they imposed the line that only the strong arm will bring them into control. That has not happened. In fact, now Burma is having to contend with 3 successful insurgencies in 3 parts, right? Rohingyas was the part where they were successful in evicting a large section of the population. And they took advantage of the part that we ourselves, we cannot forget that we are born out of a refugee crisis ourselves. There were 10 million Bangladeshis who were refugees in India at the time in 1971. Now, what would have happened if Mrs. Gandhi at the time had said, sorry, these are not our people, or we will drive you out? I cannot contemplate that situation. For the same reason, we gave shelter to the Myanmar refugees. The difference is, the Bangladeshi refugees, the 10 million, came back to the country after we got independence. That pathway is not open for them. Will it happen? We signed an agreement. I don't think they will go back under the agreement.
So, sir, much of the research, sir, actually recently claimed that, and even also you also, in your different sharing, you mentioned that Rohingya refugee team is like that something boom. So, is there any or pressure cooker? So, is there any possibility to militancy, rising the militancy or radicalization problem among the Rohingya refugee camp? And if there it is, so we are talking about the prosperity and economic development of the Bay of Bengal. So it will not affect the Bangladesh as a country. It will affect the all of this South Asia and Southeast Asia in the global parameter. So what is your thought? Because it's quite impossible now in coming days, in next 20 years, for repatriations. So if they are stuck in the same place, similar areas, so there is other recruiting terrorist group or any other revolutionist group, they can actually sourcify those people.
I take the point, and you are correct that I have referred to this as a pressure cooker, which is in which the safety valves have been sealed. And when the safety valves of the pressure cooker is sealed, that becomes a bomb. At one point, the pressure will build up so hard, it will just explode. So yes, it is a pressure cooker. We have had experience of militancy emanating from the camps earlier, and that is in the mid-2000s. We had phenomenon of Islamist terrorist Jangi groups operating in Bangladesh. Most of the recruitment at that time was done from an informal Rohingya camp that existed on the Bangladesh side of the Naf River, stretching north from Teknaf towards the Bandarban area. I saw those camps. I visited that area in 2006, in the month of July or August, and I wrote a report for the USIP at the time on the Bangladesh situation. At that time, when the refugees came, they just escaped, crossed across the river. The river is no longer than about 50 or 60 or 70 feet wide at low tide. They can easily cross it. Bangladesh government of that time and earlier decided we will not recognize them or give them any assistance. The UNHCR also in its wisdom decided we will not assist them anymore. And so they were not put in official camps which had been built for earlier influxes in the late 70s and the late 80s. They were living in cardboard and plastic sheet tents. Many of the young men from these 50, 60,000 refugees who were there were recruited by these militant Islamist groups to join them in the fight. Because I traveled along the region when I asked my guide, where are the training camps? They're there behind the hills. Where do they get the recruits? They said, sir, you'll see after a little while, and then he showed me the camp. Now, we have a fresh pressure cooker there. 1.5 million people in a very small, compact piece of land that we have allocated in a very fragile ecosystem part of our country. It is not like the larger camps of Sabra and Shatila and what you have now of Palestinians dispersed elsewhere. So in terms of density of population, this is perhaps the most number of refugees packed into the smallest area. If you pack so many refugees in behind barbed fires and camps, I mean, we don't have that barbed fire fencing, but these are camps, they are maintained. They are a cauldron. There are 30,000 people, infants have been born in the last year, as I gather from reports. They will continue to be born. There are no, it'll keep adding. Children growing up in the camps is one of the worst disasters that they can create if you look at the history of the Middle East. So will there be a possibility of instability coming from there? Very much, yes. It's already happening within the camps themselves. They are the centers for all sorts of illicit, illegal trade, whether it's drugs or gun running or humans. It's also created the initial bonhomie between the local population and the camps is also fading. That's bound to happen. Okay. And at some point, there will be a clash. I don't know what point, what will trigger it, but it's bound to happen.
Thank you, sir. So we'd like to actually talk very different things. I think one of our distinguished delegates are really interested on this matter. You are during our student movement in Bangladesh, so you are in Bangladesh. So you observe the situations as a diplomat. So given the recent resignation of the Bangladeshi Prime Minister, who actually in her regime, last 15 years, actually always not criticized, but mostly cited for his infrastructure development. But mostly, sometimes he was criticized because of diminishing some of the political institutions and some voting rights of the people. But after that student movement, the new interim government, this is different types of new concept in the democratic governance or institutions emerged, even in the Bangladesh. It's called the interim government for the first time, which was led by the Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus. So my question is, in your long diplomatic career, your journey started in the colonial period. You see the different struggle, both in the East Bengal, East Pakistan and our West Pakistan during the Indian subcontinent regime. Even our independence, even after the independence, we faced several army forces government. And also in 2008, when the Sheikh Hasina government actually took their power, we call that this government was actually main leader for ensuring the democracy. But now they criticized as a fascist, and the current government, they are trying to prove it internationally. But in present government, like a Nobel laureate lead, so what the challenges and opportunity do you think they will forces of Bangladesh in maintaining the political stability and ensuring the smooth transitions to a democratic system of governance? Because this interim government, whether they tried to promote this is a democratic government, they tried to do the democracy and different reform, but we found that in last 1 month and more than, it is just another showcase that what did earlier government. So what is your opinion in particular things?
How much time do we have?
We have 10 minutes.
Okay, so my question, yours is a long-winded question, and my answer will also be somewhat in details. I avoid talking when I'm asked to give responses in sound bites. You cannot explain a complex situation in 1 or 2 sentences, because you are then likely to be misinterpreted and misread. Bangladesh, after it emerged, has proved itself to be a unique laboratory case of state formation and state development. And we have defied conventional wisdom about the trajectory that Bangladesh could have taken in '71. We have come through this through a series of changes. The state is formed, but it doesn't become mature immediately. So we were an old nation, but a very, very new state. And we emerged in a world in which Westphalian state concepts hardly existed or was hardly understood. In 53 years, we have had 3 revolutions. 70, which was the original revolution, which was a revolt against Pakistan, and then we came out. 1990, when all the political parties raged against the military and said, we don't want martial law. Even if you say it's for the good of the people, we will govern or misgovern ourselves. It has to be done by the people. So all the parties, from the left, communists, to the right, Jamaat Islami, were one on that. And that's why it was a revolution. And then is the revolution this time. We have had 2.5 martial laws. This time, it started as a students' movement. The trigger was a legitimate demand. Remove the quota system. Why the quota system? Because the quota excluded the opportunity of large numbers of graduates coming out of the universities and not getting jobs. So basically it was said, remove the quotas, let the best person compete for the jobs and come in. Quota system then enlarged, this quota movement enlarged into something larger, and that happens because of mishandling by the government. If there's a point of time since the beginning of the movement in June till the middle of July, I would say until 15th of July, if the government had acted sagaciously, they could still, the Prime Minister could have, I don't say the government in general, could perhaps still have retrieved the situation. But when the order was given by the government, fire at will, then when the first reports were 300 something, then the second report 600 something, then we lost count. The government forgot, the party forgot the dangers in creating martyrs in any political movement. The party forgot that its own history started with 5 martyrs created in February 1952, the language movement that then kept snowballing and ended in the demand for independence and separation from Pakistan. This time, there were at least, in the middle of July, 600 martyrs. That brought out the parents of the students who were killed. That brought out lots of other people to join the crowds. It became a revolution. It became a torrent. Number 2, the government forgot the immutable law of politics. Incumbency leads to your own dangers, leads to discontent. The longer you are in power, the more likely you are to become unpopular. For the simple reason that no government can deliver a miracle that will satisfy everyone. But acts of commission and omission also fueled this. Widespread reports of corruption, banks being looted of resources, all this came into the light. But why did this not happen earlier? People were talking about it even from earlier. And I have my own theory about it. It's like, I call it the ouch point. Bengalis traditionally have a long threshold of tolerance of pain. Like a human being, you can tolerate pain for some time, but when it becomes intolerable, you shout, you scream. When that threshold of societal tolerance was exceeded this time, and those were the acts of shooting the children and other bystanders, it brought people out. The ouch point had been crossed. The societal ouch point had been reached. The government could not anymore control it. So it's a combination of forces that happened. Yes, there was long development, but development was not viewed by many as reaching the ground level. And I think what exacerbated the situation in Bangladesh is the Russian-Ukraine war, which disrupted our energy and food grain supply chain. It disrupted the normal banking operations, of liquidity being available, of inflation rising, cost of prices rising, people hurting, cost of petrol doubling. All these things had a cascading effect. And so different people had different grievances against the government. But like the elements of a perfect storm, they came together at that particular time, and the government just could not face it. Now, the role of the army is very important. The army, this time, I mentioned there were 2.5 martial laws. This time, there was no martial law. The army came in as a mediator then. It negotiated safe exit for Sheikh Hasina, perhaps also for many of the party people. It tried to calm the situation down, and it says, we will not fire on our own students, which they were ordered to, but we want to see a transition to a democratic process. And here it's important to mention that the students, when they came in, they are still very much in the controlling center. Their demand, and 2 of them are members of the cabinet, their demands, out of the many, the 3 which are notable is, we don't want martial law, like we had previously. We don't want a return of electoral politics, as has happened previously, where one party would come and play a zero-sum game. We want all the core institutions, the broken institutions, to be fixed and reformed before we go in for elections. So if necessary, this government should stay and fix them and leave only after they have done their job, which could be, they said, 3 years to 6 years. Professor Yunus has come in. He's a widely respected person in civil society and the international arena. He has already constituted 6 commissions: Constitution Revision Commission, Judicial Commission, Public Service Commission, and a couple of others. And they have been given a deadline. I think they have to report within the next 90 days. So let's see. Bangladesh continues to be a political laboratory, and if we succeed once again in the endeavor we are taking, then we will have set another example for emulation by many other countries in the brink of similar situations. And perhaps we could also present an example to Myanmar to follow.
Yes, thank you, sir. Actually, you shared all of relevant narrative about the Bangladesh, but now the time is actually to hear our distinguished panelists. Before that, yes, I also agree with you. Since about the democracy, former US President Jimmy Carter said, the experience of democracy is like the experience of life itself, always changing, infinity its variety, sometimes turbulent, and all the more valuable for having been tested by adversity. So yes, based on your justifications, that Bangladesh situations as a new emerging country is very much relevant to this definition that given by the Jimmy Carter like 30, 40 years back. So thank you so much for actually such a wonderful thought. And now I would like to request, the session is very much open for our distinguished participants for question. So question to our honorable panelist, Ambassador retired Tariq Karim. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Please identify yourself.
Sure. Vivek Pinto. I'm a journalist. Notwithstanding the color of my skin, I shouldn't be identified by the nation I come from, but that's immaterial. Your Excellency, I have a 2-part question. The first part of the question is regarding the Matarbari ultra-critical super coal-fired plant. There is a point of view that Japan is concerned with the zero emissions in that plant. And it has been said that Japan has no right to invest in coal in other countries. They have a responsibility to ensure zero emissions. Is that true? And to what extent is that plant adhering to the zero emissions policy? The second part of that question is a group called the Japan Center for Sustainable Environment and Society has made a statement about corruption in a whole series of contracts. These Japanese citizens groups are petitioning the Japanese government to look closely if the ODA can question the terms of the loan. I can go into it, but I'm sure you're familiar. Thank you.
The first question, Mr. Vivek, was on Matarbari. The Matarbari project started as a port, but it developed into an integrated project. And basically, it envisions also having a huge economic zone there. And it is for connectivity with the Northeast to enable the Northeast also to develop. For any development or investment by industrialists, you have to supply power. The plant, which was approved by the government, as presented by the Japanese government, was a 1,040 megawatts coal-powered plant. It has come under some fire also from environmentalists in Bangladesh. However, the authorities said that we will try and reduce the emissions as far as possible using technologies now available. So that's what I know from the public. It has not yet gone into commission as far as I'm aware. So that's what I can answer as to the first. But it is a huge project in the terms of what it envisions doing, because it is the Bay of Bengal industrial growth belt. It is very much at the epicenter of that Japanese vision and of the Matarbari integrated development. It's a long thing, MIDI project. Mahashkali Matarbari integrated development. The second question about corruption is something that has been voiced by the Bangladesh citizens themselves. That is one of the main reasons which gave added fuel to the students' movement. And so one of the commissions established by the interim government is to look into these allegations of corruption and bring them to account. It's not something which is unique only to the case of Bangladesh as a developing or emerging state and nation. These were allegations that rocked Korean society a couple of decades ago. These allegations continue to rock some other Southeast Asian nations in our own vicinity. In Myanmar, we've seen this happening again and again, students and people taking out. This is happening in many parts of the world. This is one of the woes that the previously colonized people emerging as independent nations have to go through. Let us not forget the development path that the developed countries themselves went through before they became developed and come to the pulpit and preach to others. They had regimes of carpetbaggers. They had regimes of robber barons. They had regimes where women and children labor were frequently exploited, but they walked their way through it through a series of evolutionary movements. We started this journey, most of us, I include Korea, Thailand was not colonized, I include many other countries, I include Bangladesh in that. We started our journey as a Westphalian entity only after we embraced New Westphalia after 45, We had no idea of how a Westphalian state works. Leaders educated in Britain came back with the ideas, and that was less than 1% of the population, who said, this is the pathway to modernity. We must follow this. Remaining 99.x% had no idea what they were talking about. They were still living in a legacy of 3,000, 4,000 years of imperial rule. You cannot change a people overnight. They have to discover the path themselves. They will make a lot of mistakes. There will be a lot of abuse of power. Who was it? Lord Acton famously said, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That was our tragedy. We realize that that is it. We have to stop that zero-sum game. Because if any one party gets untrammeled absolute power, it will abuse it. We don't have many Nelson Mandelas in this world. So this is a fact of life. And so it's not just a Japanese forum saying it, the Bangladeshis are saying it themselves, and I hope it will have some effect and the Yunus government will take account of it. And I hope that this time we will make real progress in bringing to account. As I said, the students said, we don't want to return to the old electoral politics where one party will come and displace another and then do the same old bad things. We want the broken system reformed before you have the elections. So that is also being discussed. Before I left, this is one of the things discussed. How do these separate statutory bodies, they have to be given their own secretariat, they have to be given their own funds sanctioned by Parliament, and they must not be beholden to any party, political party-run government for whatever they need. That is how the levers of control are exercised in these institutions.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just I would like to add in the first questions. Actually, initially it was planned 12 coal-based power plant. It's called SMART. So Japan hasn't any blame because when the treaty adopted in Conference of the Parties, I recall it's 27. So immediately after, Japan stopped it. So the rest of 10 is totally stopped. So, and the reality is, you know, I'm the researcher of the renewable energy. So I also did very big consultancy with the State Department. So you know that in recent target, because all about these carbon emissions, it's relevant to the renewable energy. So the world target for the developing country will reach, for Bangladesh is 40% by 2035. So how can the rest of this 60% of which source we can collect? So in this realm, that Japanese technology, the smart coal-based power plant, that's the Matarbari, is less than 50% less carbon emitted. So for that time, the government, other 11 plan is totally stopped by the Japanese government. So this is the reality in the ground. So we cannot blame the Japanese government that they violated the treaty. But we are in the Bangladesh very fortunate that it is under the one very big initiative. Also, Ambassador Karim know that Japan developed in after the Second World War. It's called Pacific Industrial Growth Belt. So it was adopted by the Bangladesh. It's called the Bay of Bengal Industrial Growth Belt. So, and this, all of this infrastructure, Matarbari coal power plant and Matarbari deep sea port, our another connectivity and Maheshkhali integrated development initiative and Indian Belu chain, all of this initiative is connected. So in that realm, Japan very much supported to our Bangladeshi development. But we have very big controversy in our nuclear power plant, which is already visible. So as Ambassador Karim already mentioned that our interim government already set up the commissions. Let's see what are the results. And thank you so much. So is there any questions?
Please, the microphone to the young lady there. Give the
Thank you, sir, for the meaningful and inspiring speech today. I am in my first year of senior high school and currently researching about disarmament, non-proliferation, and the role of the youth in global peace. I have researched that Bangladesh defines disarmament as an obligation of the foreign policy, and this is also clearly stated in the constitution. I want to hear your thoughts on what role Bangladesh and Japan have to spread disarmament awareness in the future, especially in perspectives of youth involvement and education. Thank you very much.
You brought up a good question, Bangladesh and Japan and how they look at this particular, not just, but I would say not just this particular question. We were born out of a war. We can never forget that. And according to official estimates, 3 million people gave their lives for that, for our independence. That will always haunt us. And every time in an upheaval or a conflict when there are people killed, it gives rise to more anguish and heart-wrenching. Japan has gone through its own hell when nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was morally repugnant action as far as I am personally concerned. And I will visit the city of Hiroshima to pay my respect to the memories of those who lost their lives and to the memory of the fact that this must never happen again. Where can Japan and Bangladesh work together? We have been working together since our birth in '71. But even before that, the people of Bengal in India had a special affinity for Japan. When we were struggling for independence against the British, one of our leaders, our foremost leaders, and I heard about him first from my uncle when I was just 6 years old, Netaji. He is known as Netaji from West Bengal, actually he's from Orissa. I visited his birthplace in Orissa. Subhash Chandra Bose sought Japanese help to oust the British and get Bangladesh's independence. When the 1010 war crimes of Japan were being tried after 1945, a Bengali judge on the Calcutta High Court who was asked to give a judgment, gave a dissenting judgment saying that no, that is not correct. So there are historical ties which tie Bengal emotionally with Japan. I was narrating to somebody earlier today, I was in Dhaka on home leave from my assignment in 1977 when the hijacking of the Japanese airline by the Red Army faction took place. And we facilitated the Japanese government in the negotiations and the release of the plane and its hostages. And Japan has been a steadfast partner with Bangladesh in the development and growth of Bangladesh. So in every issue, we have cooperated in the United Nations and other fora. And I see our acting ambassador sitting here right before me. I'm sure he will testify to that. I thank you for your presence here, sir. That we will continue this journey of working together for international peace. This is the year of peace. I rededicate myself. I think my country and nation rededicates itself to peace. Thank you.
So we can take one more questions.
Thank you, Ambassador Karim, for very inspiring lectures and remarks. I just wanted to ask you about this regional dynamics in South Asia. So with the change of the Bangladesh government, how do you see this regional dynamism, particularly SAC, for instance, as South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, or SACEP, South Asian Environmental Cooperative Program, These are the kind of regional schemes that might have been stalled due to some political instability, but how do you see this regional cooperation under the new leadership of Bangladesh? Thank you.
Well, let me be very frank and open here. I have always been a votary of regional cooperation. Why? Because the reason I displayed the map is my thinking is shaped by where I am located. What are the forces surrounding me? And what I have to do to survive and then grow. Without regional cooperation, Bangladesh cannot develop and grow on its own. Let me be very clear in that answer. We were the champions of regional cooperation. SAARC started because of an initiative taken by President Ziaur Rahman in 1983. It took several years. When we first went to India, they thought we were a stalking horse for Pakistan, they rejected. We went to Pakistan, Pakistan thought we were a stalking horse for India, rejected it. But we persevered and it happened in '85. But then I mentioned one of the fundamental reasons why it was formed was that we should work together and develop trade, because intra-SAARC trade at that time was only 2.5% of our global trade. Today, ASEAN has 45%, European Union has about 55, 60%. Intra-regional trade, ours was 2.5%. And after 10 years, it was 100% growth, but 5%. What prevented it? Professor Yunus has said that he would like to revive SAARC. And I would dearly love that to happen. The problem is, India-Pakistan relations held SAARC hostage. And in 1995, when I was Additional Foreign Secretary for South Asia, I was writing the brief for the government for the SAARC summit to take place in '96 or '97. I said, I do not see SAARC going anywhere after 10 years, and I don't think India-Pakistan will stop fighting in my lifetime. That was in '95. I put it down on paper. So I said, we have to think of different ways of approaching SAARC. Can we do it regional, sub-regional cooperation? There may be parts of SAARC ready to cooperate or more ready than the whole of SAARC. Because the problem is, if you look at SAARC, it's 3 sub-regions. Eastern sub-region, which is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. The southern sub-region, which is India, Maldives, Sri Lanka. And at that time, the western sub-region, which was India, Pakistan. I said, SAARC has the charter which says all decisions have to be taken unanimously. And if the 2 biggest parties in SAARC are constantly at each other's throat because of unresolved border disputes, then the rest are becoming hostage to that dispute, because unanimity in decisions will never happen. It did not happen. So will SAARC has a chance? India wrote it off virtually. I don't know if there are any Indians present in the audience, particularly the present government, that SAARC is dead. I said, no, SAARC is not dead. It is in the regional ICU on life support. People in life support sometimes miraculously also revive and come awake. I'm hoping that will happen. But I cannot predicate all my hopes and aspirations on that. That's why I have also said we have to push for other forms of regional cooperation wherever it can happen. If we can present a successful model of regional cooperation, it will create the dynamics in the India-Pakistan relationship to make people ask, those people are doing it in this other part of the world, in the same subcontinent, why can't we do it? But until that happens, I do not think we can revive it. I'm being a realist here. However, regional cooperation, we are committed to it. Professor Yunus has reiterated it. Every government that has come in Bangladesh has done so because we understand that basic thing, that Bangladesh's survival and progress and further development depends on regional cooperation. So that's my answer to your question.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this issue is really important because the importance of Bay of Bengal, we know there is the combined GDP is 3 trillion, and it's about like 2 billion populations is there. So, and as Ambassador Karim in his sharing, he mentioned that it's the epicenter in the Indo-Pacific dynamism. So if we talk, I think we can talk another 1 hour, but for discussion and this session with the interview with Ambassador Karim, all success goes to our honorable distinguished participants. I must say thank you on behalf of Peace Building Department and Sasakawa Peace Foundations. So for your information, we are Sasakawa Peace Foundation under different departments. We are conducting research very extensively. We are also supporting in different way from the people of Japan to this Bay of Bengal regions. So it's not only like that to we promoting the democracy, we also trying to establish the peace and prosperity where the Japan's presence is very visible. So I would like to special thanks on behalf of Peace Building Department and Sasakawa Peace Foundations, and on behalf of from the people of Japan, our very distinguished veteran diplomat, Ambassador Karim, who always enlightening us for his wisdom. I just round the club. And thank you all for supporting us. I just pass to finally, so all of this actually behind this program, the idea, concept, it goes to our honorable director, Ms. Maho Nakayama-san, and also I must thank you, our executive director, Adasi-san, so, and all of our participants. Thank you so much.
カリム大使、マドゥルさんありがとうございました。カリム大使のベンガル湾地域圏地域協力のお話っていうのは非常に壮大で、私たちは日頃東南アジアとか南アジアとかあるいは国民国家の枠組みで、世界を見ているけれども、全く新しい世界の見方があるのではないかと、またサークがなぜ難しかったかというお話もありましたが、在インドバングラデシュ高等弁務官として、サークの交渉に第一線で携わってこられたご経験から、それでもやはり地域協力は重要なんだということで、ベンガル湾地域圏の諸国が、招待国が競争会見にありながらも、地域協力を推進していくことで、そこがインド太平洋のメディエーティングスペースになっていくという、でそこに日本のユニークな役割があるというお話で、非常に大変刺激的でした。で大使はまたバングラデシュと日本の歴史的な友好関係、チャンドラボースのお話も出てきましたがにも触れてくださって、今回が初来日ということなんですけれども、ぜひまたぜひ日本にいらしていただいて、ベンガル湾地域の協力の構想のお話、またそれから日バングラデシュ協力のお話について伺えたらと思います。今日はどうもありがとうございました。